Let me take a moment to introduce Mike Foreman, my cousin, who is a member of the Friendswood, Texas Rotary Club. Mike is younger than me by at least 10 years. He played with my sisters as a child. As most of us as a child, I wanted to be a teacher, a fireman, a policeman, a lawyer, an engineer like his uncle, a judge like Mike's dad. Instead, I became a CPA. Mike told his parents he wanted to be an astronaut. Mike is one of the few that followed his dreams. Wow. Now here is a friend of Mike's who has a message.
Hello, my name is Commander Chris Hadfield. I'm a Canadian. I'm a fighter pilot, test pilot, astronaut, and space station commander. And I'm a longtime friend of Mike Foreman. Mike and I served in the military together. We were both test pilots with the United States Navy at Patuxent River in Maryland. And we served as astronauts together for many years. Studied together, never had a chance to fly in space together yet. But if you have Mike hold up his hand and I hold up my hand, you'll see that we have exactly the same size hands. So when we did spacewalks, we got to wear exactly the same gloves. He wore my gloves and I wore his. I'm really wishing you well with the conference. It's a great gathering. Rotary is a wonderful organization. But the truth is, if John Chambers was my cousin, I'd be there in person. Everybody have fun at the Kalahari, and hopefully I'll be there in person next time. Mike, over to you.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's quite an honor to be with you all tonight, and I'll hold up my hand so that you can actually compare that and know that Chris Hadfield and I actually do have the same hand size, and we did wear the same spacewalk gloves. It's kind of interesting, you know, when I asked Chris to tape that, he thought that, of course, as we all did, that I was going to be there in person, and I'm glad that you all are allowing me to beam in as you will, and talk to you this way from my home here in Friendswood, Texas, just down the road from the Johnson Space Center, where I worked for 17 years as an astronaut. What I'd like to do tonight, and they told me I had a limited amount of time, so I want to kind of quickly go through, excuse me, my STS-129 space shuttle mission with you all, and then if I don't talk too long, hopefully save a little bit of time at the end for questions. I know you probably, maybe some of you saw the recent SpaceX launch with two good friends of mine, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. And Bob Behnken and I actually flew together on a space shuttle mission. In fact, the other day I sent him an email to space and I said, Bob, remember when we were on that mission in 2008, you are still not as old as I was when we were on that mission together, you know, all those years ago. So Bob's still a young man, and I was just a kind of an older guy on my first space shuttle mission. But anyway, if we can, like to step through some slides leading up, and I'll show you a little video of what we did on STS-129 space shuttle mission in November of 2009. Here is the mission patch that my crewmates and I designed for the STS-129 patch. And I always can't help myself but tell audiences that this is possibly the most popular space shuttle mission patch of all 135 space shuttle mission patches. People tell me this all the time. It's, you know, my not just my unbiased opinion, but people come up to me all the time and say, you know, that STS-129 patch and its unique shape and colorful design is my favorite patch of all the space shuttle missions. So we have that to talk about a little bit. You'll see the most popular thing that astronauts like to see on their space shuttle mission patches is their name. You know, that's what kind of hits home, that the fact that you're actually getting ready to go to space. So that's our mission patch. Sorry, let me clear my throat. Here is the motley crew, the official crew portrait for STS-129. Interesting that there were 6 of us on this mission. I know some of you space shuttle nerds out there in the audience know that the space shuttle could actually carry 7 astronauts when it was fully loaded. We actually had part of our mission was to bring back Nicole Stott from space. So we saved her a seat, and she was up in space at the space station for about 2.5 months, and we were to be her ride home. So we left the seat empty for her. Interesting to look at this picture. The 3 of us on the left side of the picture, we had all been to space before. And the 3 guys on the right-hand side, this was their first mission. So I kind of laugh when I see how they actually put this photo together, you know, with all their artistic ways there at NASA, and separated the 2 groups. It almost looks like we were standing together, and then the photographer said he was ready to take the picture, and 3 of us said, "Step away from the rookies," and we, you know, we took a little step. That's not actually what we did, but, and I hear you chuckling, John. That's not actually what we did, but I like to say that that's what we were thinking. Actually, you know, I don't call these guys rookies. They had trained a long time before this first mission that they were all on, and we did get to fly together, and that was pretty cool. So let me step through these guys individually. This is our commander. This is a guy named Charlie Hobaugh, Marine fighter pilot, call sign Scorch. And so Scorch is our commander. So he's the boss. He's the guy flying the space shuttle, and the leader of the crew. Next, we have Barry Wilmore, call sign Butch. He's a Navy captain, fighter pilot. So he's our pilot, okay? So think about it this way. Scorch, who you saw in the previous slide, he's our commander. He's the guy flying the space shuttle. Butch, our pilot, he's the guy that we took along to push the button to make the wheels come down at the end of the mission. You know, that's the pilot's duty. In fact, we don't have a co-pilot. We don't have a pilot and co-pilot. We have a commander and a pilot, and that's just because no astronaut wants to be called a co-pilot. But in fact, Butch was a co-pilot for Scorch, and I always give him a hard time in saying that we only took him so that he could push the button. I was having breakfast with him not too long ago here in Friendswood, and I said, "Butch, I need to apologize because every time I talk about you to an organization, to a group, I introduce you as the guy we brought along to push the button to make the wheels come down at the end of the mission." And he just looked at me and he said, "Mike, it was 2 buttons." So, you know, it actually was. In fact, it took 2 button pushes to make the wheels come down. You couldn't accidentally do it. You had to really mean to do it. So we had Butch doing that for us. You'll see Butch in the video that I'm about to show you. And he's all over the place in this mission. He had a role in about every facet of that mission. So he was much more than just our pilot. So, but I got to give him a hard time. You know, in my previous life, before coming to NASA, one of my jobs, I was a test pilot, like Chris Hadfield said, and that's where we met. But I was also a test pilot school instructor at the Navy Test Pilot School. So I got to go there and teach pilots how to become test pilots. And 2 of my students, when I was a test pilot school instructor, were Scorch and Butch. So, you know, I tell teachers in the audience, you always got to treat your students the way that you would want to be treated eventually, because you never know when they might grow up and be your commander and your pilot on a space shuttle mission. So, you know, the golden rule, treat people the way you'd want to be treated. So we got along really well, and they are all good friends of mine. Next, and some of you may recognize Leland Melvin, because during the SpaceX launch, they brought Leland in one of the panels there, the host group there, and they kind of led the discussion around the launches. And so you may have seen Leland Melvin on TV sitting next to a couple of the SpaceX employees that were talking about the launch the last weekend. So Leland Melvin, one of the mission specialists on this mission, is a very interesting guy. Leland's a good friend of mine. He grew up in the state of Virginia, very smart kid. He went to the University of Richmond, and he was a chemistry major at the University of Richmond. Super smart guy. He also played football for the Richmond Spiders, and he was such a good wide receiver in college. He got drafted into the NFL by this team called the Detroit Lions. I guess that's a pro team somewhere. Anyway, he went to Detroit, played for them for a short period of time, and got injured, unfortunately. Left Detroit, got hired by the Dallas Cowboys, another short stint, and where he got injured again. And at that point, they told him, "Leland, we think you're going to have chronic hamstring injury issues. You should probably look for another profession." So he said, "Well, okay." I got this chemistry degree. I think I'd like to be a scientist for NASA. So he went and back to his home state, Virginia, and he went to our NASA Research Center in Langley, Virginia, and he got a job there, and he worked there for about 8 years. And as a scientist, you know, he went back to school, got a master's degree, and he's an expert in fiber optics, very smart guy. Then one day he's sitting at his desk and he decides, hey, you know, NASA has these astronauts. I think I'll apply to our astronaut program. Well, let me shift over and tell you a little bit more background on me for a second. I wanted to be an astronaut since I was a kid, like John said. You know, since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut. And so growing up, I set my course on becoming a Navy pilot, a test pilot, and getting engineering degrees. And I applied to NASA in total 8 times to be an astronaut. You know, I was just applying every 2 years when NASA would accept applications, wasn't having much success. And finally, on the 7th time I applied, I got called down to NASA down here in Houston to interview for the astronaut program. And unfortunately, I didn't get selected. Well, 2 years later, I applied again, my 8th time, and I show up down here at the Johnson Space Center again, second interview. And in my same interview group was this guy, Leland Melvin. He actually had hair back then. And I met Leland Melvin. Leland, you know, at that point in his life, had wanted to be I had wanted to be an astronaut for about 33 years. You know, I was 41 years old at the time. Leland had wanted to be an astronaut for about 33 minutes. You know, I mean, he just decided, put an application in and applied to NASA. And lo and behold, we both got selected in 1998. So we became astronaut classmates and went through all the training together. So I always joke that, you know, so I don't like Leland very well because I applied 8 times and he only applied once, but we're actually very good friends and talk regularly and still enjoy each other's company when we can get together. So Leland, great guy. You know, I like now Leland, when he goes around and speaks to groups, his story is kind of like, well, I was a pro football player. That didn't work out. So my backup plan was to be an astronaut. You know, good to have a backup plan, right? Anyway, that's Leland Melvin. Randy Bresnik, another astronaut mission specialist in this case. It's funny, Randy got hired in the 2004 class of astronauts to be a shuttle pilot astronaut. In other words, he was getting all that training that Butch got to be the pilot on a space shuttle mission. But we also gave Randy some spacewalk training early in his training, and he did such a magnificent job with the spacewalk training that we said, you know, we don't allow our commander or our pilot on a space shuttle mission to do a spacewalk. So we need to put Randy in as a spacewalker and utilize some of those skills that he's obviously shown to do some spacewalks. That's what we did. So we put Randy in as a mission specialist. He was actually flew as our flight engineer. So he was sitting up there on the flight deck between Scorch and Butch, helping them read procedures, monitor the space shuttle, make sure everything was happening the way it was supposed to happen. So that's Randy Bresnik. And since we did this mission back in 2009, Randy is still an active astronaut over there. And he's been back to the space station for a 6-month stay. And during that time, he's been a space station commander. So that's Randy Bresnik. Last but not least, Dr. Bobby Satcher. I say Bobby Satcher for last because Bobby Satcher by far is the smartest guy on this crew. In fact, he's probably smarter than the other 5 of us put together. And I'll tell you a little bit about him. When I first met Bobby, I knew he was a medical doctor because I had heard this about him. So just out of curiosity, I approached him. I said, Bobby, where'd you go for your undergraduate degree? And he said, well, I went to MIT. And I said, wow, MIT. I wouldn't think of a guy that's planning to go to med school going to MIT. You know, I mean, I think if you're going to go to med school, you want to be a doctor, just go down the street to, you know, Podunk College, get a biology degree, pre-med degree. Sorry if I'm diminishing for the doctors in the audience, but, you know, I just said, I don't think too many doctors would want to work that hard in their undergraduate degree. And he said, well, my undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering. And so, you know, that's what I wanted to study before I went on to med school. So I said, wow, chemical engineering. And then, you know, I found out that he went to Harvard Medical School. So, you know, he's definitely an underachiever. So I was talking to him about this one day. Once I finally found out 6 years later after this first conversation, he actually has a PhD in chemical engineering from MIT. And I was putting this all together in my mind. I said, Bobby, you're a young guy. How could you possibly have done all these things? Have a PhD in chemical engineering, medical school. He's an orthopedic surgeon, so 5 years of a residency, you know, and before practicing and then being selected by NASA. He said, well, you know, the cool thing was that after I got my undergraduate degree, my Bachelor of Science degree, and got accepted to med school, MIT told me I could come back anytime I wanted and work in the lab on my PhD. I said, so let me get this straight. You're going to Harvard Medical School, and in your spare time, you're going back over to MIT and working on your PhD. And he said, yeah, well, you know, they let me, so I thought I'd take advantage. I said, man, you got smoke coming out of your ears. You're so smart. So that is Dr. Bobby Satcher. I don't know if the next click, okay, good. I was going to say, I think the next click shows us a quick picture of Nicole Stott, who is the woman that we brought back from the space station. And this is a quick picture that we took as we were getting ready to deorbit the space shuttle. We had all gotten back aboard the shuttle. We had detached from the space station, spent about a day checking everything out. And now it's time to come home. So we got our orange suits on, and somebody snapped a quick picture of us. And so there's Nicole Stott, who you'll see in the video quite a bit. So here's where I always hold my breath because the next click, hopefully Liz will make this video work, and I will narrate. Oh, good, it's working. I can tell already. There's our mission patch again. There's the Space Shuttle Atlantis, which is what we rode on. This is the same launch pad that those SpaceX guys launched from the other day. So that's pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. Here we are all suited up. A couple of Teslas. We got into the Astro van, which has been taking astronauts to the launch pad for generations. So that was a cool ride out there. We got out, find out there's nobody at the launch pad when it's full of, when the space shuttle's there full of rocket fuel. So here we are wandering around looking for the space shuttle. Oh, here it is. Here's Scorch getting ready, our commander. There's Butch in the front. That's me in the background there getting ready to go in. There's Leland and Bobby posing for what they hope is not one last picture. And then here's Randy Bresnik. His wife was 9 months.
Firing chain is armed. Sound suppression water system activated. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Mike, unfortunately, we weren't hearing you because of the takeoff. So could you please repeat?
No, I won't be able to repeat because I gotta narrate this as it goes, but I'll catch up and tell you what I was saying before. So everybody's happy to be in space. There's somebody's helmet pad floating. We had to fire some thrusters to circularize our orbit. When the thrusters kicked off that pad, you see came flying back. Here's Leland getting changed out of his orange suit into some more comfortable clothing. Takes about 6 hours to convert this rocket into a spaceship. We're turning on the bathroom, turning on the galley, doing things like that. I like to look good, so I'm getting cleaned up there. There's the International Space Station. That's our destination. When we first see it, as we get into orbit, it looks like a bright star, and as we get closer and closer, it gets bigger and bigger. Finally, when we're right up next to it, it is so big compared to the little space shuttle that it looks like the Death Star. There's a great view taken from the space station of the Space Shuttle Atlantis. We had about 28,000 pounds of cargo in the back delivered. We did this flip maneuver at the end of the space shuttle program so astronauts on the space station could take pictures of our black tiles to make sure we didn't have any damage. Here comes it.
Getting there, get ready. Mark, out the window.
Yep.
Out the window.
111's when I saw them both.
Ready with the timer?
Ready.
Got that?
Coasting in, coasting in. 18 inches. 9 inches.
Ready?
2 inches.
Fire.
That's the initial contact. We got capture.
Capture. Station reached the Atlantis. Capture confirmed.
No free drift yet. Still steady light.
So we get docked to the space station, open the hatches, float inside. There were 6 astronauts and cosmonauts already on the space station. So we had a little mini reunion with everybody, and then we got right to work. And our pilot, Butch, he wanted to capture a video tour of the space station. So he got a cameraman, one of the space station astronauts, Jeff Williams, with a camera, and they're floating through. They're starting in the Russian end of the space station, and this is what it really looks like today, most of it. So floating forward here, we were getting ready for the first spacewalk. So there we are in the airlock. That's a Belgian astronaut. That was Frank Davina that just floated past us. This is the U.S. laboratory we're floating through right now. This is a Canadian astronaut, Bob Thirsk, not Chris Hadfield, but Bob Thirsk. This is the European module laboratory we call Columbus. And here's the Japanese laboratory we call Kibo, which means hope. Float down through this tunnel. Try not to get claustrophobic for a second. We're just going to come out on the middeck of Atlantis. Jeff Williams is not sure which way is up. There we go. There's our commander. I never see the commander doing any work. Float up to the flight deck of Atlantis. You see all the controls and displays. Everything's powered down while we're docked to the space station. And we primarily went to the space station not only to bring Nicole home, but we did 3 spacewalks while we were still building the space station at the time. And here we are in the airlock. That's me on the right there with Butch and Nicole helping us get into our spacewalk suits. There's Bobby Satcher getting his helmet on. You definitely want to have your helmet on nice and tight before you go out in the vacuum of space. I'm ready to go. Kind of thinking, come on, Bobby, let's go. Float outside, beautiful views from outside the space station. It's just amazing. You know, I tell the astronauts that don't do spacewalks that the views from inside the space station are pretty good, but the views from outside are just amazing. My cuff checklist there, it's kind of hard to see. It says, go Navy, beat Army. This is an S-band antenna that we were delivering to the space station. Bobby Satcher has got the easy job. He's riding on the end of the robotic arm, so they're taking him everywhere he needs to go, and I'm down there plugging away with a wrench, unbolting this antenna from the sidewall. Leland and Butch are the guys inside controlling that robotic arm, and Bobby's telling them which way to go, where to take him. And I hand him this antenna, and they take him over to the space station, and I met him over there on the space station, and we plugged it in, bolted it to the outside of the space station. There's a view of Bobby's reflection. Randy was our quarterback for this first spacewalk, so Randy is inside talking to us for the entire time, telling us where we go next, what our procedures say, reminding us of our tool settings for certain tasks, and keeping us on our timeline. I told you Bobby was an orthopedic surgeon, so here he is doing some maintenance on some of the robotic arms on the space station. Space station actually has 7 robotic arms, and he's riding around on the biggest one, and they're taking him to the various other ones so he can do a little maintenance, you know. So I told you Bobby was an orthopedic surgeon by training, and he said, Mike, I could use the same grease gun on your knee if you need some work done. And I said, I'm fine, my knees are good. Leland and Butch are watching Bobby's working there on his helmet camera, so they know when to move him. 2 days later, Randy and I got ready for the second spacewalk of the mission, so no rest for the weary. I was still kind of tired from the first spacewalk, but here we go again. Butch is helping us get our pants on. Float outside, that's me, outside the space station. They asked Randy and I to move this big antenna from one side of the space station to the other. So here we are unbolting and unplugging this thing. And on a later space shuttle mission, they brought up something called alpha magnetic spectrometer, which they plugged into that site right there. We took this antenna over to the other side and plugged it back in on the other side of the space station. There's a view from my helmet camera looking at Randy. You can see his safety tether there floating in front of him. And here's somebody waving to us from inside the space shuttle window. And you've heard me use the term spacewalk a couple of times. You don't really use your legs outside the space station. There's nothing to walk on. There's no gravity. If you tried to walk on the space station, you would just float away from it. So we spend 6.5 or 7 hours climbing on the outside of the space station on all these nice handrails. We don't really move this fast, though, because we don't want to fall off. It's 250 miles down. So we move a little slower than this. Here we are coming back to the entrance. And my crewmates just love this scene from our crew video here. I'm not so fond of it, but they laugh every time at what it takes to get me out of this suit now. If I've been in it for about 9 hours, by the time it's time to get out. Butch is standing on my legs. He's got me unbuckled at the waist, and he's holding my sleeves up, pushing me down, and I'm wriggling and fighting and contorting to try to get out of this thing. I remind my crewmates, you know, I got big bicep muscles that get caught in the sleeves. Now you saw that Leland, that's probably why he doesn't play pro football, taking hits like that. Here's Nicole. So the space station crew with their backs to us is transferring Nicole over the last.
Physical separation.
Houston copies. Station copies.
TCS is good. Okay.
Which
Pedals are clear. I got LBLH.
We've been known to play with our food in space. Leland has squeezed out some of his water, and in weightlessness, it forms a sphere. We didn't have any of those Swedish fishes to make an aquarium, so he used M&Ms. Here we are back in our orange suits, getting ready to fly home. There's the Kennedy Space Center, the long runway at the Kennedy Space Center. And here we are gliding back. I told you about Butch's job there, putting the wheels down. So he must be looking for that second button about now. Ah, here comes the wheels. Good job, Butch. You'll see here in a second, as we touch down, this inset view shows how white hot Atlantis is after that deorbit burn, all the reentry heating that we feel, and all those shuttle tiles keep us protected. The space shuttle used a drag chute to help it stop because at the end of a mission, it was just a very heavy glider, little bitty wings, had to fly about twice as fast as an airliner on approach. So once it got on the runway, needed all the help it could get to stop. So we had this drag chute. Drag chute comes off about 70 miles an hour, and then we use the brakes the rest of the way. So there's our mission patch again. That was STS-129. We were in space for about 11 days. We went around the Earth 171 times, and we traveled about 4.5 million miles. So thank you for paying attention. And if you'd like, before opening up to questions, I can go back. I'm sorry, I guess we did a pretty good dress rehearsal, didn't we, Liz? We may not have tested out how my comms would be trying to talk over top of the video, which I do, routinely in audiences that I'm in person in front of with a PA system, that I can talk louder than the video sound. So what I was saying as we were launching there was when the space shuttle was launched, the space shuttle weighed about 3.5 million pounds. Most of that was fuel, but we had 7.5 million pounds of thrust. So my joke there is that when those solid rocket boosters light off, there's such a jolt, it's such a kick in the backside. You definitely know you're going somewhere. You just hope it's not Disney World. So if we have time, let me know. I would love to talk to you some more about whatever you want to talk about. I saw questions popping up. Of course, I'm trying to look at the screen without my glasses on. So
we'll help you out with that.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to read. It looked like they were questions, but please fire away, whoever wants to moderate the questions.
Well, we have several for you, and Bruce is going to address them, but I just want to tell you so that you understand, when we worked with John on this conference this year, and Paul and Tracy were instrumental in putting our program together, John's numero uno goal was for you to be a part of it, and to hear you speak today and to see your story and what you shared with us has touched my heart, and I know it means a great deal to John. So thank you so much for being here.
And we've got a special person on the line as well, our Rotary Director-elect from your neck of the woods, Susie Howe, who I think you know is on. Susie, did you want to say anything to your friend Mayor Mike?
Mayor Mike, good to see you.
Good to see you, Susie. Can I tell him the story about when we first met?
Please, that's a good story.
So I was at Susie's installment there to be a Rotary director, and I went up to her and I said, Susie, I'm Mike Foreman. I'm a Rotarian from Friendswood. I'm also the mayor there. And she said, when are you going to fix my street? So, that's par for the course, and I get that. I was walking around my neighborhood this morning, and I had a neighbor that said, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you clean up the dirt over here? So, it's everyday occurrence for me.
So of course the burning question is, did you fix her street?
I don't know. I don't know what street she actually lives on. I give everybody the same answer and say, yeah, we're coming to that. Your street's on the list. And it probably is.
Let me finish that story first though, Mike. You continued on and made it Susie Howe Day in Friendswood on February 16th. So I'm still elated for that. But no, Marywood is still a mess out here.
Well, I'm sure the mayor will get to it. So let's get to the questions now.
Make a note of that, Mary. So there were lots of questions that came in. Some of them kind of overlapped a little bit. So the first one that a few people asked, thoughts on the public-private partnership or the space for profit model. What's your feelings on that?
Hey, I love it. You know, I love the fact that there are billionaires in this country, and I think there's a law somewhere that says as soon as you get to $1 billion in your portfolio, you gotta start a space business. You know, you gotta have a rocket company or something, because all these guys, Bezos, Elon, they all have rocket companies, and that's great because, you know, the more money that they put into the space business, the less money we taxpayers have to put in to learn all this stuff that we're learning as we do this. So I love it. I was still at NASA when they wrote those contracts with Boeing and SpaceX, and I was actually the liaison astronaut over to Boeing for a while as they started to develop their rocket. And so I'm still pulling for Boeing here real soon to get their rocket going so we can have another rocket with a U.S. flag on it flying our astronauts to the space station. But I think it's great. You know, I as an astronaut, I know, you know, astronauts will always have jobs either working for NASA or these other companies. And to me, it's like whoever wants to pay for the rocket fuel, I'm happy. You know, send me to space, strap me in, I'm ready.
I thought this was a great question. When you watch a launch like we just had, what do you look at? What do you, I mean, you know, as the professional, what are you looking for when you see these launches and when you see these missions?
When I'm watching that mission, you know, with two good friends in it the other day, I'm listening to the comms, I'm listening to the voices, and I'm listening to, you know, all the banter going back and forth. And I'm part of what I hate is that the narrators, the commentators feel like they need to talk, and they always talk on top of, you know, the people that are actually working the launch, working the mission. And sometimes I can't understand, I can't hear what the astronauts or the Capcom, the capsule communicator or flight director is saying, you know. So, but that's what I'm looking at is I'm watching, and this was a unique way to launch a rocket is that SpaceX decided that they would put the astronauts in and then fuel the rocket. And in the space shuttle days and all rockets before SpaceX, they always fueled the rocket before the astronauts got there. And, you know, fueling the rocket sometimes doesn't go perfectly. And so we all scratched our heads when SpaceX first announced that that's what they were going to do. And so I was paying attention as those guys were flying in, and then, you know, listening as they fueled that thing, and didn't know if we were going to get to see another work test, you know, as they blasted the capsule off the top of that thing because something happened during fueling. But everything went well, and obviously Doug and Bob were happy with it in the planning process, or else they probably would have said, no, I'm not doing that. But that's you know, the new way of fueling rockets, I guess.
So I know when Sue and I get onto a flight together and we have takeoff, she grabs my leg and digs into my knee when it's takeoff. So Paula wants to know, what did it feel like on liftoff?
Well, you know, on my first mission, not this mission that we just saw, but STS-123, I was sitting right next to Bob Behnken. So I had my hand, I'm digging into his knee, and I was, you know, my gloved hand. No, I'm joking about that. But it feels like a space shuttle launch feels like a car wreck. And by a car wreck, I mean, I've been in my car before, unfortunately, and sitting at a stop sign and had somebody plow into the back of me, you know, and get that whiplash, you know, where you're just thrown into the back of your seat because of that force of your seat basically plowing into you. And that's exactly what it feels like, you know, in a space shuttle launch. You 3, 2, 1, 0, and pow, the solid rocket boosters ignite with such a force, and there's no throttling those solid rocket boosters we used in the space shuttle days. There's either on or off, and when they're on, they're at 100% thrust. So instantaneously, you have this solid rocket fuel that burns explosively and provides a lot of force. And so it feels like a car wreck. And you know, it's not a car wreck like you just got hit at a stop sign. You got hit, and then you're just continually accelerating for 8.5 minutes. So your seat is just pushing into you harder and harder for the entire ascent, we call it, the 8.5 minutes to orbit. And then as they throttle, they do throttle the engines back at the end, because at the end of the ascent, we call it, we're only on the shuttle's main engines, which are fuel rocket engines, and so they can throttle those back a little bit, so we don't have an abrupt cutoff at MECO, which is main engine cutoff. So we sort of just ease out of our seat, ease into your straps a little bit as you become weightless and you're in space.
Rajan wants to know what your comment is on the cool SpaceX spacesuits versus the NASA suits.
Well, those are pretty cool, but I'll take my spacesuit, any day. I trust my spacesuit. I spent a lot of time in the orange suit, and so you like what I think sometimes. Those guys obviously train in those suits and probably feel pretty good about them. They do look a little spiffy. Wait till you see the Boeing suit. When Boeing gets their act together and launches, they got this cool blue spacesuit that's going to rock everybody's minds again. So it's pretty cool, but I'll take my ACES suit, the orange suit that we called ACES. I don't know what the acronyms, I don't remember that, but ACES.
I think that's how some people felt about the new Spartan uniforms when they came out on the field last year. So I get it. So Carrie's daughter wants to know if astronauts are considered military veterans, even if they weren't in the military before they became astronauts.
No, they're not. If you weren't in the military, you're not a military veteran. I was in the military, and so I am a military veteran. I'm also, I was also a civilian astronaut because my time in the military ran out, and I was not ready to leave NASA, so I converted to a GS-15. I was a civilian astronaut for about 6 years, and I don't know if everybody knows, the people in the military probably do. You can only spend 30 years in the U.S. military without a waiver. So I got a nice letter in 2009, and right before this mission, actually, that we just watched, and they said, as of June 1st, no, I guess 2008, I got the letter, as of June 1st, 2009, you're going to be moved to the retired list. So my 30 years was up, and so I served.
Thank you for your service in the military and in space. A couple of people wanted to know, these are related questions. What was the most difficult part of training? And then our Wayne State Rotoractor Devankar wants to know what your biggest challenge that you faced in your career, other than Susie's street problem, and how you overcame.
The first thing that popped in my mind was, well, being the mayor of a small city, has its, I love it. I'll tell you right now, Susie, I love being mayor of Friendswood, and I'm gonna run again and again. I'll do this for as long as the voters will let me. The hardest thing about astronaut training was actually preparing for those spacewalks. And the way we train for the spacewalks is we have the world's largest indoor swimming pool here in Houston, and it's 101 feet wide, 202 feet long, and 40 feet deep. And in that pool, they have the entire space station mocked up, the outside of the space station. So we can put on those same suits that we're going to wear in space, go underwater, and climb all over the outside of the space station, just like we're on a spacewalk. And we're sort of neutrally buoyant, so we don't float up or down. They add weights or whatever it takes, styrofoam, to our suits, so that we just stay put when we let go of the space station. And that's exactly what happens in space. When you're floating around it, you let go and you just stay right there, pretty much where you put yourself. So I've spent probably, I don't know, 400 hours underwater training in that suit, getting ready for my spacewalks. And I have 32 hours, a little over 32 hours of spacewalking time. And for that, I, probably spent, like I said, 400 hours in the pool training for that. And it's physically demanding in the pool because, well, you're in water, and when you try to move yourself around, and I don't know if you can see me very well, I'm grabbing those handrails and I'm moving myself along the outside of the space station. I'm moving my body against all that water resistance. So you really get tired working in that suit. The suit has to be pretty tough because it's protecting you in space. It's really a one-person spaceship because it provides oxygen, cooling, CO2 scrubbing, radios, all the things that we need, a drink bag with some water in it. So working in that suit was the hardest thing. And actually, caused my my left shoulder to get arthritic. And after at the end of my space NASA career, I had to have my left shoulder joint replaced. So I got a shoulder replacement. So I got a titanium shoulder right here. I don't want to pull my shirt back and show you the scar. That's probably going over the top. But because of all the contorting, getting in and out of that suit, you know, and when I was showing you guys and talking about it in the video, I was not joking about the contortions that I would have to put my body through to get in and out of that thing. And I asked my orthopedic surgeon, who is a team doctor for the Houston Astros, Houston Texans, and he did my shoulder surgery. And I said, Pat, do you think this damage to my left shoulder is due to getting in and out of the spacesuit? And he said, Mike, if you were an accountant, you would not need this surgery. Definitely. So yeah. So that's the hardest part. And for about 5 years, I lived with the pain of all that, all the bone spurs and the bone-on-bone contact in there, because I had no cartilage left after it got arthritic. But now it's great, you know, and works perfectly, and can sleep at night. So that's the hardest part.
Well, Mike, we cannot thank you enough. The comments and the feedback that we've gotten, and the inspiration and the admiration that we have for you and what you have done is second to none other speaker that we've ever had. So District 6400 Rotarians, this is how we wave on and applaud on Zoom. So we applaud you and everything that you have done, sir, and are so proud and happy to know you and to have you join us here tonight. John?
Let me just say thank you, John, for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of it. I so wish that we could all be together, but hopefully that's coming. You know, we'll be together someday.
Yes.
But,
we hope so.
Not today, but thank you so much for having me and allowing me to tell you some of my stories, and I appreciate it.
Mike.
John.
I cannot thank you enough, and Lori enough, for being here tonight, especially during the pandemic. It really has meant the world to me for you to share your unbelievable journey in space, and to show my appreciation. I'm making both you, Paul Harris Fellows, in support of Rotary Foundation. That is you and Lori. When the awards arrive from RI, of course, with the pandemic, nothing moves. I will forward them to President Robin, who I've been in contact with. And please, everyone, join me in thanking Mike once again.